Hello, hello everybody. Even though Millennial Prepster is not here, but I'm on administrative tasks a little bit. If you're pre-recorded, you must ahead 15 minutes or so. Millennial Prepster says he will be joining us at 10:30. And I'm confident that he will, or at the very least, I have no reason to believe he won't be. And if he does, well, we're just gonna pull the plug on this whole thing. But he probably forgot to feed his rabbits this morning and had to run out and do that. Anyway, I'm very new and inexperienced at doing these hangouts, so things might be a little bit rough. Whenever I've debated people on live hangout, I just don't have enough attention span, I suppose, or I'm unable to read the live chat, so I apologize for that. But since this is going to be more of a relaxed discussion, I don't have to be concentrating that much on what it is I'm saying. I am going to pay more attention to the chat and maybe take questions, so on and so forth. Try to make it a little bit more interactive. Now, administrative tasks. I guess I'm looking for some mods. So, what's up, everybody? Hello, robot voice. Yeah, shit happens. I don't know what to do about that, to be honest with you. I don't know how many of you know, I live in the boonies and there is no competition here as far as internet goes. So I basically get fucked by the current provider. They sell me a certain amount of bandwidth, but unfortunately, they're not able to deliver what they promise. Gut Gain says, I eat raw lamb fat and it makes me feel amazing. I believe it. I believe it. Hello, Greg. Anyway, I'm just going to, well, the people that I think are cool and have shown that they are, I'm just going to make you guys moderators. So don't freak out if you see a little, I guess it's a little wrench next to your name. That means you can basically time people out, erase comments, block people. I ask that you guys keep it cool. I mean, they're going to be trolls, they're going to be assholes. I prefer they get timed out rather than blocked. I don't want to, I don't want this to become a complete echo chamber. So, if somebody gets out of pocket, gets out of line, time them out. And if they don't learn, yeah, block them. If people just come around spamming and just being calling people names, that sort of nonsense, yeah, just block them, get rid of them. Nobody needs that. But that's basically it. Yeah, Ghoul says this isn't a debate, so there won't be a lot of zombies today. Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. You never know with these vegans, and it is Saturday, so maybe they'll take a break from all the video gaming and Cheeto chat flooding. I don't know what that is, Bob. Don't basically don't chat flooding. I guess that's commenting a shit ton. Have at it. We only have, I don't suppose we're gonna have more than 30, 40 people watching. Maybe I'm overestimating, being overly confident there. So I don't suppose the chat is gonna be that busy. But as long as people behave, obviously we're not all agree on everything. I think it's completely fine to disagree, have your own opinion. As long as you're respectful, you know, there's no problem. Anyway, I hope Millennial Prepster gets here soon because he's had a lot of ideas he's been wanting to talk about for quite some time. It's been difficult to arrange something, and now that we have, he's not here. No big deal. I'm sure he's coming. Anyway, if you guys have any questions or increase your body and your voice, says Sunny. All right, let's see. How's this? Is this too loud? How am I sounding? Oh, are you just saying in general, people increase your body voice? I'm not sure if that was a remark to me. That wasn't loud enough, but let me know if I'm, because I just turned my mic up. Do let me know if I am too loud. All right, Dr. Steelhammer says, good. Guys, check out Gut Gains. He's in the chat. I believe he went carnivore fairly recently. I don't want to misrepresent him. I don't remember exactly the chat he had with this other channel, a guy named Drew Barry. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, funny questions. He has a channel. He just started eating carnivore. So go check him out. Yeah, sorry about the robot voice. It's just going to happen sometimes. I'm trying to get fiber optic over here, but that's going to be like $1,000 and 6 meter. Everything in Ecuador, for those of you who don't know, is more. That's the name. Thanks, guys. Everything in Ecuador, no offense, but this is just the truth. It's a fucking scam, all right? Anytime they sell you something, like a pound, for example, is 14 ounces. It's just how people operate here. It's part of the culture, when they tell you you have 2.5 megs, if you get 50 megabits, you should be. Gut Gain has been carnivore for about 114 days now. That's about as long as I've been eating carnivore. I think I started April 14th, so it's about that long. I've been cheating a little bit lately because, as you guys know, I had my food poisoning, so eating some carbs to gain weight. I don't know if this is the best approach necessarily. I feel like shit eating carbs, man. Look, some people can do it, and we're not all the same. Anybody who tells you that we're all exactly the same and we should all eat exactly the same way, it's just ideologically possessed. They don't know what they're talking about. We're all different. Some people are allergic to peanuts to a point where they could die if they eat a little bit of peanut butter. You know what I mean? Some people handle wheat better than others. Some people not at all. So just little things like that should tell you that. And look, there are people out there who can't handle eating a ton of fat or even a ton of meat. I mean, and I know people like that. One person like that personally. So it is what it is. We're all different, even though I do believe meat is beneficial to all of us because of our physiology, history, and just the fact that we can't get all of our nutrition from plant foods. But that is not to say that everybody should be eating carnivore. And definitely not everybody, we know this from all the failed vegans, shouldn't be eating a vegan diet. Anyway, maybe more on that later. Why did I move to Ecuador? Was it specific reasons, or it doesn't really matter to you exactly when it's South America? Well, I always had a 5-year plan, which ended up being more like a decade-long plan to leave the United States. That was really the plan. I didn't know where to go or why necessarily. Why? But it wasn't that I was thinking about going to a specific country. And in the midst of this 5-year plan, I met my future wife. So, you know, it didn't complicate things, but it added another variable, and it was no longer just about me, right? But the goal was to go as far away from the United States as possible for all the reasons I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, you know, like raw milk becoming illegal, having backyard chickens becoming illegal in certain jurisdictions. You know, this always expanding control grid where, you know, you can't wipe your ass without Big Brother, you know, listening in on your cellular device and then trying to sell you toilet paper on Google AdSense, you know what I mean? It's like that. So the connection is very bad. Well, fuck me. What do you want me to do? Sorry, guys. I'm sure this is why I can't even turn my camera on because well, that would just totally kill it. Anyway, hopefully you get some of what I'm saying, most of what I'm saying, and hopefully Millennial Prepster comes on because of the session. But you know, if I had to encapsulate our reasons for living in the United States, it would be one word: freedom, or the search for freedom. Now, I know you guys are sold this idea that the United States is, you know, the most free country in the world, and I wasn't being rude, Black Country Wanderer. This is just how I am. Don't take it personal. I'm just an abrasive mother flower. You need to take it personal. Anyway, we're told this lie essentially that you're so free. You know, America is the land of the free, and that's not the case. You know, out here, I have a lot more freedom than in the United States. For example, I built a house. I'm in the midst of. It's not finished yet, but I'm in the midst of building a house, and I don't have permits. I don't have to do anything to pay anybody anything. You know, I hooked up electricity on one of our properties with a permit. You know, I can still anyway. We could sell all milk. We could sell our products without giving any money to the government, right? There's very little taxation, so on and so forth. It's I'm not saying it's completely free here, but in comparison, yeah, this if there is freedom, I would say it's in a lot of these third world countries that your voters basically want to scare you from even so much as visiting, telling that it's dangerous and so on and so forth. And that's true to a degree, but I mean, we lived in Oakland for a few years, and as far as safety and crime goes, I mean, compared to Oakland, this is paradise out here. Was it expensive to move to Ecuador? Yes and no. You know, I mean, it depends on what you want to do, right? If you want to buy land, and it depends on how much you want, it costs a lot, but that's on how much money you got. You know, I would say you could easily move to Ecuador, buy land yourself up if you're an enterprising person who has a natural language or you speak Spanish, and you could just, you know, basically create your own employment because it's not that easy out here necessarily. You could go work for a university if you live in the city, or you could teach English. There is employment, especially if you speak. I would say with 50 G's, you could set yourself up pretty well. You have to be maybe my internet provider is vegan. You have to you gotta be fuck my connection. Maybe this will be better. I have to turn off the chat. Maybe that's. I'm sorry, guys. I mean, you want to get because the connection sucks. I mean, working on it. I wanna do everything in power to get this going, but it's what it is. Anyway, what the hell was I talking about? Yeah, I think if you have 50 to 100 G's saved up, you can set yourself up like a king, honestly, in Ecuador. But you got to be outgoing. You got to be a hard worker. Um, told to and I was told to reboot the stream. I don't know if this is any better. You let me know. But I completely understand if you guys are funny. If you want to jet because the quality shit, nothing I can do about that. I mean, I'm doing my best. Anyway, Baba says, what did he say? I don't know. Is gains in the house? No, man. I mean, guys, is it sounding any better or is it just still shit? Because if it is, sound is very bad for me. I'm going into the. I gotta go to my internet provider tomorrow and figure this shit out because this is a little bit of Okay, this is the last try. People are saying vegans are hacking into the live stream. I just doubt that right now because I'm losing all my patience. I rebooted my computer, my Wi-Fi, and Google is still giving me error messages. So you guys let me know if the sound is bad, then I'm sorry. We're just gonna have to do this some other time. So let me know. I can't even. Okay, the sound is fine now. Maybe that's what I needed to do. But as soon as it starts messing up again, you guys let me know because I'm really getting tired of this shit. Oh, hey, Bob is back. Oh, thanks for giving it another chance. You know, sometimes, from what I've noticed, sometimes I'll be choppy or Google Hangouts will be choppy on somebody's end, but not in general. You know, like I said, as soon as it becomes shit again, you guys let me know because I'm seriously losing my parent. Millennial Prepster is still not here. I hope everything's okay, but you know, maybe he's having issues jumping on. I don't know. Bob is right. See you later, the ghost. Bob, it's not. I know what you're saying, but it's bandwidth. You know, when I have enough bandwidth, which happens sometimes, the internet's fast enough and everything works just fine. Plugging in the wire it makes a difference to me. Do I want to be a boxing coach? I don't have any qualifications. You know, I'm just a fan. But I am looking forward to Anthony Joshua versus Viking. I probably won't be watching it live, but I'm curious as to see what happens and how the fight plays out. I think I have a pretty good idea, but it remains to be seen. You guys let me know if you have any questions because I'm trying to run out of ideas here. I saw Frank Tufan just uploaded a video with Kasumi Chris, and she's what's the phrase? Giving it out to all them graffiti boys, if anybody remembers the reference. Probably not, seeing as Beastie Boys are ancient history by now, I guess. I don't even know what kids listen to these days. Is my microwave always running? Is it really bad and choppy for more than just one person? Do I still follow boxing? Barely.
Hello?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, sorry about that. I had some connectivity issues, but I think I'm here with you now. Can you see me and hear me all right?
Well, I can hear you, and I can hear you just fine. People are telling me that I've been very choppy myself. Well, I don't know what the hell's going on. I think maybe it's my trying on, and then maybe you got kicked off or whatnot. So maybe we could start, and if the technical issues persist, maybe we should just do it some other time because I've been on here for a while to figure out what that is. About you guys in the chat room, let us know if it's on there, and if not, we're just gonna chop it up. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I can hear you fine now. Looks like the echo might be gone, but I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Am I sometimes roboting?
Yes, you definitely are robotic.
Yeah, I just been in a lot of issues with my
Okay.
internet. So anyway, let's just play it by ear. If it becomes awful, like I said, we might have to do this some of the time. I might have to go into my internet provider's office and give him an earful. Anyway, maybe you wanna introduce yourself, but before you do that, no, go ahead. Why don't you just introduce yourself and give the people what
Give
they
the
need to
people
know
what they
about you.
want. Give the people
Yeah.
what they want. All right. So quick little intro on me, I guess. The Millennial Prepster. I have a small little YouTube channel here, and I just like to talk about gardening, permaculture, sustainability, that kind of thing. Preparedness is also huge. As far as my diet goes, I do follow a plant-based diet. Now that's kind of, I don't even know what that means anymore if you were to just listen to what YouTube says a plant-based diet is. But I'm a traditional, I guess, peoples from the blue zone. So the Mediterranean island and Japan. So I have ancestry in the blue zone. So I do hold to a blue zone diet, which is plant-based, but it doesn't mean that animal products aren't included in that. So I guess I would say there is a difference between plant-based and veganism. I think there are huge differences, but yeah. And so that's just kind of me in a nutshell. I like gardening. I like permaculture and sustainability. That's kind of my thing. So that's just a brief little intro to me without making it too long. You still there? Think I might have lost you.
Sorry, bro. I just got kicked up. You know, there's truth. Can you hear me okay?
You sound robotic, but I don't know what it is. Is it a microphone issue? Maybe you might need to plug in a headset, or you probably already
No,
have that.
no,
You
no,
probably
no,
have
no.
that.
It's not microphone. You know, just check my internet's working fine. Maybe there's some truth to what some other people have been saying that I'm being hacked because.
Oh, you sound great right now. Like right now, you sound perfect.
Yeah, you know, I just like went on YouTube and everything's working fine as far as my internet. It's just these Google Hangouts keep kicking me out, and people are saying I'm roboting. So look, if it starts sounding shitty, like I said. But anyway, the sort of, I didn't really catch everything you said, but the impression that I get from you is that, like a lot of people who grow their own food and they're not vegan,
Right.
and they're into food sovereignty and self-determination, the right to self-determination, you seem to have a bone to pick. And I put myself in this category too, but you seem to have a bone to pick with this authoritarian vegan who seems to want to take these rights away from us. Am I getting this right?
Well, the only reason why I even opted to join into these conversations is because I started to post some things on just permaculture in general, gardening. If you look at my channel, there's tons of it in there. And on one of my sustainability videos, because before I bought my home and everything, I was a full-time RVer, and I was off grid a lot, right? So I was able to sustain myself, in a self-enclosed RV with solar, renewable energy, that kind of thing. So one of the videos I did was I was cooking some rabbit, which I had butchered and everything myself on a Nuva Wave stove, or maybe it was chicken, but I was cooking it and I was showing how I was able to cook off grid using solar, right? That was the gist of it, was sustainability. And I got attacked by some vegans, and I just kind of found it very interesting that, you know, like I said, I have no qualms with these people, but they're, you know, and I'm sure you're familiar, there's trolls out there that go out of their way to find anything that has to do with animal products and kind of go at it. So yeah, I don't appreciate that. And I think that, you know, I hope to find people that, you know, are just, you know, regardless if you're vegan or what have you, just open-minded to facts and reason. And I feel like veganism as a movement has hijacked certain facts and have put some, you know, some false statements out there that are easily debunked if somebody just takes the half second just to hear out what people, you know, like me, permaculturists, have been doing for a millennia, right? So I feel like anybody has any understanding of animal husbandry can easily, you know, kind of go at these misconceptions, essentially, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense totally. I mean, it seems like it's really hard to know if the majority of these ethical vegans are just dickheads, or if it's just a very vocal minority that's given the whole movement a bad name.
And I think that's hilarious. I don't think there is such thing as ethical veganism, to be honest with you. Maybe in small facets, but as a whole, I just don't see, and we can kind of get into that, but I just don't see how veganism is somehow ethical. And I've made a couple of videos on that, but there's just some really easy to decipher things that contradict their own testament to, you know, their ideals. And I think that's important to note, that just like they say there's no such thing as, you know, ethnical omnivorism or carnism, whatever, there's no such thing as ethical veganism either. I mean, they break their rules all the time.
Oh, you know, I agree with you completely. And, you know, almost every time I say this, I'm making air quotes around ethical.
Right.
Because, you know, not only do most of these people not seem very ethical, but I have yet to hear a legitimate, logical argument for why it is ethical.
I agree.
Now they do make good arguments against, let's say, factory farming, but that's not exactly an argument for veganism. That's just an argument against factory farming that a lot of meat eaters can also support. You know what I mean?
Right. It seems like they have an issue with, and this is I'm not in any way trying to insert any beliefs here, but I feel like a lot of these people that, you know, would be for animal rights, liberties, and movements, I think they're more, like you said, they're against industry, they're against capitalism, they're against free choice. And I think that's the bigger facet in what we're talking about here when you're talking about animal rights. But yeah, I think that, you know, I can agree with them that, you know, big, you know, animal agriculture is bad, but big plant agriculture is just as bad, if not worse.
Yes, exactly. And I think the biggest problem with the movement is that it's not honest. It's really motivated by emotion and, you know, wanting to quote unquote save these animals, and everything else is really secondary, but they try to paint the health issues and, you know, everything else as more important sometimes. And I think what gets lost in that is they're just basically not honest about the fact that it's not a very healthy diet for a lot of people. It's not very ethical. You know, it's just this emotional knee-jerk reaction to this slaughterhouse porn that is really, and the factory farm porn is really, when you look at global meat production, is really a small percentage of what goes on. You know what I mean?
I'd say I'll kind of take a couple, and feel free to correct me. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I do think big ag in general is harmful. Now, as far as the ethical veganism portion, it's one of those things where and I bring this argument up, and every time I bring this argument up, I'll show you how they kind of rebut it, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well. So, you know, somebody like me brings up, hey, I grow as much of my own food as possible. As far as meat products go, I don't buy them because I have no need to, based upon what I can produce myself and based on what I can get locally from the wild, fishing, that kind of thing, right? So meat is really the easiest thing to not buy at a store, in my humble opinion. Now, when we're talking about vegans, if you're going out to the grocery store and you're buying your food from the grocery store, you're every carrot, every plant-based item already has a body count attached to it. We can talk about, you know, the hundreds of millions of animals that are killed every year in the U.S. alone because of pesticides. We can talk about the people that are killed because of plant residues that is a level 1 carcinogen, a type 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization also talks about child enslavement. 70% of all child labor is in the plant agriculture industry. So if you're going to tell me and try to virtue signal that you're trying to save animals, but you're buying your produce from a grocery store, you've already lost. Like the idea that you're about sustainability, the idea that you're about, saving as many animals as possible, to me has already been thrown out the window. And we're not even getting into the cruelty-free aspect, which is just another label. So I think what we're talking about a lot of labels that are thrown out there with the intention to make money. Like, when it really comes down to it, you can be an off-grid vegan, right? Well, let's say that exists, but you still have to, but somehow you don't want to grow your own common comfort to get your B12. So you decide you're going to use the supplement industry. Well, then let's talk about the supplement industry. Let's talk about all the horrible things that go into those industries versus somebody like me who can basically produce a year's worth of animal products using rabbits with less environmental impact than it takes to produce 1 gallon of almond milk, right? But when we start talking about these are things that, insert fallacy here. And that's kind of the argument. And if you really care about sustainability, first off, you got to get rid of these insert fallacy arguments, and you have to really start taking ownership of what it is that you believe in. Because at the end of the day, these vegans will say they're all about animal rights, but their home is overrun with any kind of pestilent, whether it be insect or rodents, they're going to call an exterminator to come in and kill them. If they're living where they're living, they're not going to live there their entire life. They have no problem destroying some kind of forestry habitat in order to buy another house and to build a house. So they say that they care, but it's really about just virtue signaling with their diet that requires the evil industry, but they refuse to look at, sustainability, or they refuse to look at animal rights from a real holistic point of view, which is what you do in every facet of life. And in this conversation, notice how we haven't even started talking about fiat currency. We haven't even started talking about energy. We haven't even started talking about transportation. We haven't even started talking about all these other things that go hand in hand. So I find it really dishonest whenever a vegan wants to say that they can virtue signal just because they don't buy meat from a slaughterhouse. Because guess what? I don't either.
Yeah, there's a lot of denial and cognitive dissonance that comes with the ideology. I'm going to give you an example of what happens here in Ecuador. Soybeans aren't really consumed in this country at all. The only way you're going to see soy products in food is when it's imported from the Western world. However, where I live, quite a few fields right on the river, because it's the most fertile land, are dedicated to soybean production. And I don't know why that is exactly, but they seem to spray those fields with glyphosate more so than anything else. They probably do it 3 to 4 times a week. Almost every other day, they're spraying with some kind of pesticide or herbicide. And it's like I said, it's right on the river. The irrigation is just canal irrigation, basically. So all this runoff goes in this beautiful, clean river that you could literally drink the water from, and you're fine, right? So they're polluting the river, they're killing the fish, and then they're getting this inferior product that's full of pesticides and glyphosate that these people that spray they're not educated about. They don't use any protective gear, any masks, anything like that. Right. And their babies are born deformed with these they're retarded, for the lack of a better politically correct word. And it's causing all these new diseases in these people, like cancer, and they have no idea what's going on. And so these are environmental impacts and impacts on the human population that vegans don't take into account, nor do they really know that the soy that they're getting from this third world country is garbage.
See, and that's where I disagree with you. I think they do know. I just think that because I mean, there's no, you can't tell me that activists like Earthling Ed, Joe, and all these other people that are knee deep in this stuff and go and do this for a living, activism for a living, who get the behind the scenes with all these, great documentaries, Dominion and Cowspiracy, Forks and Knives. You can't tell me that they don't understand what it is that the plant agriculture does, because what they do is they take, and because at the end of the day, all these stats that you hear about animal agriculture, how it's the worst and greenhouse gases and everything, what they're not telling you is they're not just taking animal agriculture, they're taking plant agriculture, because 50 to 60 to 80 to whatever number insert here they want to add that is involved with feeding animal agriculture, they're taking both industries and making them one. So they're taking the plant agriculture industry and they're taking the animal agriculture, and they're combining them because of the high percentage of grain that is grown for animal agriculture. So they're not even being honest, because if you're being honest about, you know, greenhouse gases and stuff like that, I can show you documentation, scientific documentation that says that grass-fed beef, and we're just talking about, and they always want to bring up beef, which, you know, it's whatever, but grass-fed beef, as far as methane that's released, the amount of absorption from those prairie fields makes it obsolete, because it is absorbing as much methane as it's taking out. So the idea that animal agriculture isn't sustainable, they're just not looking. They're refusing to look at the facts. They're refusing to look at the scientific literature, and they know what it is. But where I lost all respect is when I'm listening to Joe and I'm listening to Earthling Ed, and I have these clips that I put on in a couple of my videos when he's like, well, what should I do? Well, you can go to Target, you can go to Walmart, you can go, and then as soon as you start mentioning supporting the plant, you know, plant ag, and you're supporting big industry that does all these horrific things, how do you expect me to take you seriously? Like, how do you expect me to take you seriously that you really care about, you know, animal rights? Like, I don't know how you expect me to do these mental gymnastics, because I can't. You know what I mean? Like, and I've tried to see, well, how, and then you ask them, well, okay, so since you're telling me that this is what I need to do, how do you justify those deaths? They can't. They refuse to answer it. They're like, well, now you're just playing to this logical fallacy. Well, you can call it whatever you want, but the truth is these deaths are happening. So how do you address it? You know what I mean? And right, so it's like,
yeah, that's the cognitive dissonance that I'm talking about. Look, I agree with you that a lot of the leaders know what goes on, but they have other motivation, and I think some of them might be actually paid to lie, essentially. But the average,
I mean, yeah, think about it. When they're getting money from advertising, and they're getting money from Patreon, when they're getting money, and I don't want to bring religion into this, because I feel like that's a big misnomer. But as you can see in many religious, you know, offsets and stuff like that, you can see that, you know, people, if they're willing to make money, they're willing to push a certain message, because in every religion, there are certain things that when you bring up are uncomfortable. So you just don't bring those things up. So when you're getting people that are making, you know, 6 figures a year just off Patreon alone, that's not including all the other, you know, all the other monetary gifts or values that they're getting from other activism. You can't tell me that they are in a position to say, you know what, well, let's talk about pesticides. Let's talk about plant rate. No, they're not going to do that. They're not, because that's going to be uncomfortable, because the people that are giving them the money are the same people that are buying their food at the grocery store, right? So they realize it. I just think that it's going to be at a detriment to them. And so the ends justifies the means in that perspective. I think that maybe a lot of normal vegans that just got into it because, you're right, they saw the slaughter porn, maybe they don't. But even then, when they do realize it, they can't accept it because veganism has become their identity. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you know, you can't have conversations with these people because they're so programmed to just shun facts and knowledge. And like I said, I'm not here to judge anybody, but at some point you have to address, you know, the horrible things that are going on with those industries that they're supporting. I mean, you have to, or else we're going to be going around in circles, and you just can't take them seriously, is what I'm trying to say. But I think you're well aware of that. I think you see that every day, it seems.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that a lot of these people have just created this niche and they're comfortable and they're just going to stick to it. But I also think it's deeper and more sinister for some of them. And I think, you know, they're sponsored by maybe processed food companies. I can't say. But if you were to dig deep into that, you'd find that there is some corporate money behind some of them.
Sure, but, and me personally, I'm not I don't like to draw conclusions where I can't see them. But it's obvious that they know the information and they purposely try to hide it. So that part's evident. Why they're doing it, I'm not gonna shift a particular reason. But the truth is that we both can see abstractly, based upon the video clips that I have and what we've seen, they are purposefully not talking about it. So I totally agree with you there. As far as who's paying them or what the reason is, I'm not going to pretend like I know, but it is happening, and I think we can both agree on that.
Totally. Hey, someone had a question for you in the chat. Do you know who Alan Savoy is?
I don't.
But you sure know what reversing the desertification through grass-fed animal agriculture is, and I'm sure you could talk about that a little bit.
Or is this just talking about the ability for, is this talking about the studies about prairie grasses, you know, and just
To
how they
regenerate.
CO2, the regeneration factor?
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
so I can tell you what I can tell you what I can do for myself on a small scale, if that's okay.
Right.
Okay, so for me, you don't have to post a video, but if they were to go to my channel, they would see that I made a video on how to basically, and let's get into this because I want to talk about one of the vegan myths, is the fact that you have to feed animals plants, you know, that wouldn't otherwise go to humans in order for them to, you know, to sustain life, which isn't true. So what I've been able to do is I've been able to take the sod that's already, you know, the grass that's already that came with the property, which is just low grade grass that's used for, you know, everyday commercial residential use. And I've uprooted that and I put down prairie grass, which has different kinds of grass, alfalfa, timothy, just a bunch of different variants of prairie grasses, hays essentially. And so what you do is you let them grow, and when they grow, they get to a certain height. It depends on you. I'd say that, you know, especially for residential use, you don't have to make it get too high, but you get 3 or 4 inches of grass, and then I have an electric lawnmower and I go and I cut it, and I bag, and that's all bagged, and I'm able to take that. You can mill it, you can feed it directly. And so what you're doing is every time you're cutting it, you're stimulating the growth of that grass, and that grass takes out, you know, 400 to 500% more CO2 than your typical prairie grass. So anything that the animal eats, right, and by them grazing, right, by any kind of grass-fed animal grazing, they're stimulating that growth, they're fertilizing it with their waste, and that's essentially how CO2 is taken from the atmosphere. And there's a lot of research out there that says if we were to just to create tons of prairie grass around the world, we'd actually be able to you know, significantly reduce CO2 emissions, right? So I think that's probably what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and also the fact that, you know, not all of the grass is going to get trapped inside of that lawnmower, so there's going to be some clippings rotting and improving your soil, and like you said, animal waste will go back into the soil and improve it. And then you said you're planting alfalfa and probably other leguminous plants that fix nitrogen in the soil, and just in general you're improving your soil quality and building it up. And one great example of this happening in nature, where all this like 80 or 100 million, I can't remember right now, buffalo that used to roam the Midwest in the United States and left literally meters or many, many feet of topsoil that is still there, even though it's being depleted now to grow corn and stuff like that. But, you know, this whole... Let me just finish real quick. Sorry. This idea of like CO2 and methane being somehow destructive, what people don't understand is that planet Earth, and this goes back to this whole bullshit about global warming, or man-made global warming, rather. Our planet is a closed system. Whatever, you know, all the chemicals and molecules, they're all here. And like the methane and the CO2, they're trapped in the ocean, let's say, they're trapped in the soil, they're trapped in the plants. Whenever we release that, and you know, the planet gets warm and CO2 is released and methane is released, that is precisely what plants need to thrive. So they reabsorb all that stuff and they grow better. And then, you know, the planet gets warmer, there's more plant life, and it's just a self-balancing system. Yeah, we've impacted it with industry and stuff, but ultimately it all balances itself out. And so when there's a lot of CO2 and it gets warm, more plants grow and they reabsorb all that CO2. And we're not really adding anything that's not already there. You know what I mean?
No, that's a great point. And then the only thing that I would caveat that with is, you know, especially when vegans bring this up, you know, well, what are you doing about it? You know, have you taken the grass that's outside of your house and replaced it with something more efficient? Do you use solar? You know, and that's what I do. Do you compost? Do you do all that stuff? Because if the answer is no, because a lot of times, like with Logan Thunder, he was somebody that I debated. You know, it was my first debate with him. And the first thing I asked him, do you care about sustainability? Are you somebody who cares about environmentalism? I'm like, yes. I'm like, okay, what crop zone do you live in? And he's just like, cricket. Like, this guy doesn't even know. At least at that time, I hope he at least researched it because I put him on the spot. He didn't even know what crops grew locally to him, what wild edibles they were, what their, you know, what zone he lives in, soil hardness. He doesn't know he doesn't even understand, you know, what his seasons produce. But yet you're trying to tell me that you understand about sustainability and you care about environmentalism when you don't even realize what's going on in the ecosystem in which you live in. And so for those things, it's very hard for me to take you seriously. Like, if we're going to have a conversation about it, at least be able to speak to the environment that you live in. I think at a minimum, that's not asking too much, you know? And so, yeah, I think a lot of these things are important. That's why I think permaculture is great, is because all permaculture is you're taking natural patterns and you're making them, you know, more efficient. And by using technology, I've been able to do that. And so, you know, everything from my yard to even the duckweed I produce in all my bodies of water that I can, I'm doing my part to remove, you know, CO2 emissions and just to make myself more sustainable. So I think this is important to talk about, but you're right. These people, they refuse to even look at the science and look at what global warming really is. And like I said, I think we can all agree it exists. So what are you doing about it? But, you know, it's never their problem. It's always the problem of somebody else to do. As long as they're buying their plant-based products from the grocery store, they're doing their part, right?
Yeah, and you know, I do admit there are some environmentally conscious vegans who will live the way you do or the way I do, and that's fine. And I'm not even like trying to virtue signal that I'm so like environmentally conscious. This is just, I'm not doing this for the planet. I'm doing this because it works for me. So I want people to understand that I'm doing it because it's selfish and it works for me. This is the way I want to live, period.
Right.
I'm not trying to do it for the planet. You know what I mean? I don't think.
Yeah, and it's funny because the vegans that I meet that are into permaculture or gardening and stuff, they're not out there yelling activism, telling people to buy food from the grocery store. They're just not. Somebody I follow, I'm actually a big fan of his, John Kohler from GrowingYourGreens.com. He has the biggest gardening channel on YouTube. He's a vegan, and he'll even tell you straight up that, you know, it's his lifestyle. He chooses to live it his way, but he understands, you know, that the ethics behind veganism and it's not there. You can't virtue signal just because you're a vegan. You know what I mean? And so he's a great example.
His garden is not vegan, is it?
No, well, yes, it depends. Like, if we're talking about veganic, obviously he uses worm castings. Worms are animals or insects, right? So is that veganic, right? So it's one of those things where, yeah, I would say he uses permaculture the way it's designed. It mimics out actually patterns that we see in nature, which include animal products. As far as his diet goes, he's a vegan, but yes, I think he understands permaculture better than most of us. And yeah, you need these other patterns in play. And what I'm trying to say is he's not your typical vegan activist that's going out there and yelling and screaming, "Hey, you need to change your diet, and here's some slaughtered animals." You know, he wants to change the world by everybody growing a garden. And I think everybody should. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't a new development. People have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. You know.
Well, John Kohler also has a friend who keeps a goat or a few goats, and they made a video talking about how the vegan diet doesn't work for everybody. So, you know, this is what he chooses to do, and he promotes it, and I'm cool with that. Yeah. But at the same time, he's not an ideologue, and he accepts the fact that not everyone's the same.
Exactly. People that get it. You know what I mean? Like, we could sit here and you can talk all day. You know, we can talk about the Mediterranean diet and say, hey, well, I think that's too plant-based. I'm more cardism. Okay, that's fine. Some person may say, I don't drink alcohol. Somebody else says, I have red wine. You know, it's like, when it comes to stuff like that, if that's what we're arguing about, small things, that's fine. But the idea that they have to be militant about saying, hey, you're wrong and you're an evil, horrible person, you know, well, let's have a conversation. And a lot of times they run away from, you know, basic common sense and basic questioning. Every time I ask the question, I never get an answer. I just get more hate. And it's like, you know, and I think you've noticed this too, because I kind of want to talk about this. When we're talking about like the name, the trait stuff, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I just find it hilarious how they always want to go outside of reality. Like, they want to talk about aliens, or they want to talk about enslaving human. Like, no one's talking about that, but they're like, we have to talk about, you know, don't look at me, what I'm doing right here. Don't look at what I'm doing in real life. But what if aliens came down? It's like, well, we can't talk about reality. I think we got to fix reality first, because there's countries that are, you know, killing women because they have consensual sex with people, you know, you know, two adults having consensual sex, or they're throwing gays off buildings, or X, Y, and Z. But no, we can't. Let's talk about aliens. Let's talk about animal rights from an alien perspective. It's like, well, can we talk about what you're doing actually in your life? Can we talk about what crop zone you live in? Can we talk about? But no, they don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And I always found that
actually
interesting.
Matters.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing, let me address the alien example. I understand the purpose of hypotheticals, but a hypothetical example has to be at the very least plausible. The way I see it, from what I understand, there's zero evidence for the existence of aliens. Just because there's flying saucers out there means nothing. those are Hitler's. Those were Nazi Germany's flying objects, whatever. But you know, to completely reject reality and talk about something that is, at this point, you could say impossible. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. It is precisely what they do. They reject reality and they want to talk about something that does not apply. Look, if aliens do exist and they come down to Earth, everything changes. Everything changes. Our morality, everything is going. We're going to have to reassess our entire existence. Period. But they expect you to have an answer to that on the spot, even though it's not likely to happen.
And just to, you know, and I guess the biggest criticism I have of, I guess, so we're talking about name the trait, and I kind of want to get into this right quick. I don't think this has to take long. What is your, like when they play name the trait, like what is your thought process? Because I think the way I think about it is totally different than the way it's been portrayed, and I think I might have it wrong. So can you kind of explain it? Because I think I have an easy answer for it, but I feel like it's so I feel like my answer is so simplistic that I have the whole question wrong. So can you just shed some light on that and kind of tell me, because you've debated this, and every time I try to bring it up, the last debate I did with Conscious and Omnivore, I tried to bring it up, and everybody didn't want to bring it up for whatever reason. But what are they asking? Like, what are they truly asking? Because I'm super confused.
Well, they didn't want to bring it up because when I asked the pertinent questions, they're all stumped. They don't know how to answer it. What they're saying basically is that there has to be some kind of tangible difference between people and animals in order for us to be able to justify eating animals, right? It's not about the fact that most of us need to eat animals to survive or to thrive. It's about, they make this huge logical leap right off the bat that people and animals are equal, because they'll say, well, you need to find this trait that makes us different, and they'll tell you this trait doesn't exist. So essentially what they're saying, and this shows up in the way they present the argument, is that people and livestock animals, for example, are basically the same. That's what they're saying.
Right. So can you play devil's advocate, and can I answer it?
Yeah. So the question is, it's a syllogism, or like a logical progression, and an argument that contains two premises and a conclusion. And the first premise is humans are of moral value, right?
Right.
The second premise is name the trait that if it were absent in human beings, name the trait that is absent in animals, if it were absent in human beings, would make it okay to kill and eat human beings. In other words, what is it that animals lack that people possess that makes it okay for us to treat animals differently than we treat human beings? And if you can't justify that, that means we need to extend human rights to animals, basically.
Well, first off, I would say, first I want to talk about from a non-hypothetical realistic, and I guess I can jump into the hypothetical afterwards. So I think that idea, the whole name the trait idea, is very dangerous because it reminds me of Nazism. And this is why I say that, because realistically, you shouldn't kill somebody based upon a trait. The idea that we would even talk about killing somebody based upon a trait is really disgusting, and I find that just very putrid. Now, when we're talking about the use of force, right, and we're talking about any matrix that anybody uses to use force, we can talk about that, right? So, for example, using force against another human being, guess what? We have very similar, if not all the similar traits. That's not why I'm using force. I'm not using force because somebody has a trait. I'm using force because somebody has a knife or they have a gun. And so for ROE, so from a military or law enforcement setting, it's intent means an opportunity. So that's where you would use, this idea of using force against somebody. So as far as the intent, if your intent is to survive and to thrive and to eat, all right, well, then you have the intent. Means what depending on if you have a weapon, your bare hands, an opportunity, is that animal present. And that's what we see in every predator, in every facet in real world, right? Whether we're talking about lions and gazelles or we're talking about a hunter in the wild, right? So when you're talking about the justification, and any matrix that we see is always intent means an opportunity. Now, to go down to what makes animals and humans different, well, there's a lot, right? And I like when people talk about, and they bring intelligence up and they say, well, there's retarded people or there's people with mental incapacities. How about that? It's a better word. Well, guess what? That's not the rule. That's the exception. Just like if I were to say, well, human beings have 10 fingers and 10 feet. Well, that's that's a rule that we use in biology that we use to describe, but there are exceptions to every rule. So to say that the exceptions, just because there's one or two, genetic differences, does not mean that all of a sudden all of humanity is somehow the same or different. And I think that's important to mention. And then I remember in this conversation you were talking, somebody said, well, does might make right? And I would say, no, might doesn't make right, but guess what? Might makes reality. So if we're talking about aliens coming down, do I think they have the right to kill me and my family? No. But the reality is, if I don't have a way to protect myself or intent, if I don't have the means and opportunity, because I have the intent, but if I don't have the means or opportunity, guess what? It doesn't matter. So just because something is more powerful, does that make it right? No, in my opinion, and I believe that morality is definitely subjective. You're not going to find two vegans that agree on everything, just like you're not going to find two X, Y, and Z people that agree on everything. But the idea that power does not make reality is something that obviously needs to be addressed. I don't think that there's a trait that an animal has that makes it, that justifies the difference between me eating them. It's not about a trait. It's about, my need to survive. It's about my need to be able to feed myself, especially absent of infrastructure that does evil things, which they rely on. So I think those are important things to talk about. And when you're talking about killing something just because of a trait, I think that's, I think that can help in your decision making. Sure. It's kind of like when they say, well, why don't you eat dogs? Well, growing dogs and trying to grow them for food is not very sustainable at all. It's not, it's counterproductive. So why would you do it? Just like eating humans is counterproductive. Why would you do it? You know what I mean? So it's like, when you're talking about, reality, and if we can talk about, human cannibalism that's happened in the Asian countries, it's happened in Russia, it's happened in the Nordic countries. Like, we can talk about that stuff when it came to extreme starvation. This stuff actually happened within this, the 19th century, in the early 1900s that this happened. So it's one of those things where, are you going to say just because that person is starving that ate another human being, they're wrong? Or the plane that hit the Swiss Alps with the athletes on it, they wind up eating dead humans, is that wrong? It's intent means an opportunity. If your intent is to cause suffering and harm, then yeah, I would say that's bad. Just like what we do for every premise that we have for every law. You can say laws aren't perfect, and I totally agree with you, but the premises that they have, these are the same vegans that if something were to happen and they were to kill somebody with their car because they were drinking and driving, the first thing they're not going to go to is say, well, hypothetically, I did it. So it's no, they're going to say, hey, lawyer, my intent was I was not in the right place. I was under this substance and this substance. You know what I mean? So they will apply unrealistic rules to everybody else, but they won't apply them to themselves. And so that's kind of how it's long-winded, but I feel like that's the only fair way to go about these conversations of name the trait, because at the end of the day, it's not a trait, with any use of force, it's intent means an opportunity. And that's how you're going to justify it. You know what I mean? But this idea, well, you don't have to eat meat because you can go to a grocery store that poisons the planet, enslaves children, and kills and murders hundreds of millions of animals, will take care of you. Screw off. We're not even on the same wavelength. You know what I mean?
So you basically recognize two of the biggest problems with name the trait just now. And let me elucidate what I mean.
Right.
There's this logical leap that vegans make, and they just move right past this point without having to prove it, that the vegan diet is sufficient for everybody, right? So if you work with that assumption, well, then eating animals is needless, right? Something that has to be established in order for name the trait to even come into the picture. It has to be needless, right? Because they'll say, well, the lion eats the gazelle because it needs to eat it. We don't, which is BS. This hasn't been proved. So they make that one big logical leap, and they don't ever want to even be questioned about that. They don't have to.
Well, yeah, but the idea is, if the idea is not to kill an animal to eat it, well, what's more ethical? Poisoning an animal to eat a carrot, or making an animal suffer through poison and enslaving a child to eat a carrot, or humanely, quickly, without suffering and pain, slaughter an animal, eat it, and use its entire body for X, Y, and Z purpose. Like, if we're really talking about that, if we're really talking about it, then you have to address the underlying issues, and they can't. At least I haven't seen it anyway.
No, I mean, I agree with you, but again, they reject all that and they just assume a lot of stuff without ever having to meet the burden of proof. But another thing that you recognize about name the trait is this fact that it's the fallacy of the single cause, because they seem to think that you can reduce humanity to a single trait like intelligence or sentience or whatever. See, what people fail to notice right off the bat with Name the Trait is that the first premise is humans are of moral value. Now, that's retarded humans, that's unintelligent humans, that's dead humans, that's humans in a coma, that's babies with anencephaly that don't have any sentience. So if you say right off the bat humans are of moral value, and
Yes.
in order for your syllogism to work, the first two premises have to remain intact, you cannot then later on turn around and say, well, within your moral system it's okay to eat a human. No, it's not, because humans are of moral value. Without this, without agreeing on this and this staying constant, your whole trick falls apart.
Well, and here's another thing too. We're talking about if we're just being real about, like, if we're just if and I know I'm going to offend a lot of people, and I get that.
Good.
But if we're just being real, right? If I'm being 100% real with you about rights and where do rights come from and all these things, right? People can say that there's God-given rights, right? People can say all these things, but without somebody willing to use force in order to maintain those rights, it's null and void. You know, with any movement of civil rights, whether we're talking about my culture, whether you're talking about indigenous cultures from Africa or what have you, Native American culture, we're talking about any culture in which rights have been attained, it's through the use of force. And so, you know, these animal rights activists can talk all they want, but until people are willing to send their daughters, their sons, their brothers, their fathers, you know, uncles, aunts, until they're willing to say, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice my life for this rabbit or this guinea pig, their attainment is never going to be reached. Like I said, we have people that are being thrown off roofs because of a sexual preference. So the idea that somehow we're going to be able to accomplish this without having to, use any kind, without them actually having to step up and say, no, this is wrong. Like if you really think that the life of a human being is the same as an animal, I don't see how Earthling Ed can go to these slaughterhouses and take video selfies of him with, cows getting their throat slit. I'm saying if I was in that situation and that was a human being, I would not be able to sit there and do absolutely nothing. It would be an honor to do something, because the consequences of not doing something are so high. You know what I mean? And I've done a video on this too. So when we're really talking about this, like, unfortunately, they don't want to see things from common sense and reality. Because if you really do believe that the life of these animals are the same, then vegans really should practice what they preach, and they should, try to, create laws and all. But they're not trying to do that, because right now I feel like it's just, it's a way to make money. It's a way to make quick money, and that's why they're going about it. But if you're being really serious about, this animal rights thing, and you really think that the life of them are the same, I'm sorry. What would they do if they saw little children and buses being taken to somewhere to be slaughtered? You think they would just sit around and do nothing? Maybe so. Maybe those people are just that weak, But I think the understanding that human life is way different than animal lives, I think that's pretty universal and has been for millennia. So. I think it's one of those things where, yeah, bad things have happened to people of all cultures, my culture included, but that doesn't mean that somehow, justifies whatever platform they're trying to take, if I'm just being honest. And I know that's gonna be offensive, and I can probably tell some people, I can't see what's going on your end, but I'm sure some people aren't happy, but it's just the truth.
No, I mean, there's the mods are doing a pretty good job of controlling the vegan horde. So shout out to you guys. As far as like going back to this whole sentience thing, I think it's these people are either unaware or they're dishonest, because they don't really care about sentience. When you look at it, like, if veganism gets its way, what's going to happen is that we're going to eliminate all sentient livestock on the planet. So we're going to eradicate, genocide a whole bunch of sentience. Now, yes, there is some suffering when it comes to, raising animals for meat. There's definitely a little bit of suffering, not as much as they'd like to have you believe. However, what happens is that more and more animals, thus more and more sentience is constantly being produced. So if you really value sentience, I mean, you can't really call it either way, because, meat eaters create sentience and vegans want to destroy sentience. So are they really pro-sentience? And another thing, abortion. You
Yeah, I
know,
was going to bring that up. Yeah.
like in Canada, for example, abortion, from what I understand, is legal all the way up to birth, just about.
Yeah.
And I believe
Really.
I think we have very strong evidence that the fetus is basically sentient at 22 weeks. So there's tons of sentient babies being aborted in
Well, it doesn't
Canada.
even matter. It doesn't even matter if you say you can't. I
No.
mean, eggs are not sentient at all, and you know, but yet that goes against veganism. But yeah, you can talk about abortion, and like I said, you can even talk about what they do in their day-to-day lives when they go to the store and buy food from the grocery store. So, like I said, there's so many, you know, fallacies in their logic. You know, it's just like I said, until they can actually, like, no joke, address things line by line. Because at the end of the day, you know, since I eat animal products, I'm already the worst person in the world to them, which is fine. But when you're looking at it from a realistic standpoint, I can at least, you know, as far as my justification is there, right? But if you're saying that humans and animals are the same and you should never hurt them, but yet your lifestyle hurts them every day more than mine does, you know, I don't even see how we can have a I don't even see how we can have a logical conversation. You know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest thing to look at when we're talking about this. But yeah, I mean, as far as sentience goes, I mean, like I said, veganism will never, it'll never, I don't ever see it being a thing as long as as long as humans are still treating humans as horrible as they are in the modern day in 2018. This idea that, you know, somehow you're going to have people that are going to, you know, be martyrs for these animals, you know, it's just null and void. I mean, there's a huge difference between, you know, donning, you know, being like, you know, I'm going to fight for my country because, you know, I'm patriotic and I care about, you know, whatever ideologue there is, versus saying, hey, well, this guinea pig, you know, I'm going to give him everything I got. You know, most animal activists that we see that really do anything really, truly crazy, they release some minks from captivity, or they steal some animals from captivity. Like, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Every once in a while, you'll see them, you know, decide to light off a lumber yard or something on fire, firebomb it or stuff. But these people are so small, few in between, that I just don't see it. And as far as what you're saying about sentience, yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're going to go around. I mean, if they're like PETA, yeah, they're going to go around killing animals. But I think the idea that we're just not going to breed them, and, you know, it's like, at the end of the day, the only way for this to even work is you have to have enough people switch. And I just don't think the science is out there for veganism. Even if everybody wanted to go vegan, we don't have the infrastructure, both plant supplements. Like, for right now, I can tell you, United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, right? This president over here, he has to sign a $7 or $8 billion subsidy just for plant agriculture to make it through these tariff embargoes that are coming. So this idea that we're going to have somehow sustainably be able to make this transition is just tomfoolery. It really is. You know, agriculture at this scale is just not sustainable. So the whole idea from just a scientific and mathematical perspective is not possible. It's just not. And any vegan that says it is obviously has not looked at the math. They haven't looked at the subsidies. They haven't looked at it from a very holistic point of view. And, you know, and there's nobody that can make a video, you know, rebuting that. You know, I've seen all these videos, especially from Mick the Vegan, and he talks about all these hypotheticals. But, you know, when I mention, hey, well, what about the $7 billion, you know, subsidy that has to take into place in order for the plant agriculture in the United States just to make it to the following year? Nope. Radio silence. Why? Because they don't want to talk about that. It can't. It goes against the narrative, you know. So, you know, we can expect to see higher food prices, you know, probably globally here within next year, and that's just part of politics, you know. And, you know, veganism has been hijacked by the politics of, you know, plant agriculture. It's just they're hand in hand. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, plant agriculture and big pharma, because if you could get all these people sick, then, you know, you get them sick on one end by glyphosate and all these chemicals, right? And nutritionally deficient food. Well, and then on the other end, and I think, what is it, Bayer and Monsanto merged not that long ago. So now one hand washes the other. On the other hand, you could sell them pharmaceuticals to, you know, cure them from the disease that you caused in the first place. So obviously there's a lot of commercial interest in veganism, and it's huge business. That's really what it's about, because you take a product that's fairly cheap to produce, and a lot of it is animal fodder. Like kale was sheep food for most of its existence, right? But now they take something that's like $5 for a bale and they sell it for $5 a pound. And then they, you know, they put a little bit of fake vegan cheese on there, and all of a sudden it's $20 a pound. So it's huge profit margins on processed food and even just selling essentially animal food to people. And when you listen to these vegans saying that they think we could subsist on animal quality or feed corn, which is completely indigestible to our system, you know, it really boggles the mind.
Right.
Where
And
they
I
get
got
these
to
ideas from.
I got to agree with you about the only thing I got to disagree with you on is the idea that, you know, kale and all these traditionally were they animal food? Yes, but realistically speaking, you know, animals, especially grass-fed animals, they eat things that are unedible to us. That's just a fact. Now we have made their lives better by, you know, overall giving them things that, you know, we would normally traditionally eat. But you got to look at it like, if you look at how long, you know, agriculture has been going on in this mass production of crops, it's been very short-lived. Like I said, that's what's so amazing about grass-fed animals, bro. Is the fact that you can take a rabbit, a chicken, a cow, anything, and they can eat all these unedible. Goats are a great example. All these unedible sources to us, and they're able to produce high-quality meat. You know what I mean? The fact that a pig can take sources of food that we can't digest and make bacon out of it, you know, and like the whole, you know, that's just a meme analogy, but it's the truth. You know what I mean? You know, these rabbits I have, I don't have to feed them one plant that's edible to me, and they're still going to produce just as much meat as they normally would. You know, so this idea that we're feeding, you know, grass-fed animals our food is just a complete misnomer. It's not even.
No,
but you're right. But they are taking lower quality foods. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you're
Yeah.
saying though. But you're totally right. Like they're able to monetize based upon a, you know, a character trait, to be honest with you, off an ideology, and they're making good money from it. And you know, I'm all about people. I'm all about the free market. You know, I'm all about people making the money any way they can. I just think if we're being realistic, you know, that's why I like the free market, because I can take 21st century technology, whether we're talking about aquaponics, whether we're talking about, you know, raising food locally, and I can make it benefit me, you know, and I think that's what's great. But yeah, how they're doing it is just, it's not sustainable at all. I had a discussion with somebody on conscientious omnivore channel, because, you know, he's growing his own food, and I really appreciate that about him. But there's a lady there. Well, I'm going to assume she's a lady based upon her name, but she was telling me, well, you can just get rid of all your plant-based products and just grow beans. But she wouldn't specify what kind of beans. And if you look at how many beans it takes, just not nutrient-wise, because it won't make it, but calorie-wise, for one person to have 2,000 calories of food for a year per day, I mean, it would take over 2,500 square feet of grow room, and that's if you do it 100% the most vertically sustainable way that you can, and that's just for one person. So it's just, you know, and that's using the most high quality bean that I can't even produce probably in my crop zone. So this idea that just somehow going 100% veganic is sustainable, there's just no science for that. You know, there isn't any.
And not everybody does well on beans. Some people
Right.
won't
No,
be able
I
to
agree.
sustain, but some people won't be able to use that protein efficiently enough. And, you know, as far as growing nothing but beans, then you run into monoculture problems, which is you're going to have all kinds of pest problems. You're going to probably have to start using chemicals. Like that's completely antithetical to permaculture, which is
yeah, and
the
I will
natural way
agree.
of doing it.
I will agree. I always say this, and I know your followers, and you probably not gonna be happy with it. Do I believe you can be healthy on a vegan diet? I believe some people can, but it was going to require lots of supplementation, and we're going to require buying food that's outside of your crop zone, and it's going to require big globalization of, you know, pesticides, child labor, and bringing in food from all over the world. That is the only way that you can possibly make it. It's true. That's the only way you can do it. Is it possible? Yes, but it's going to take a huge infrastructure cost and a huge cost and environment to make it happen. I don't know of one crop zone where somebody locally can produce everything they need to be 100% sustainable, including their B12. I've never seen that. I've never seen it anywhere. And if you're looking at these big plant-based, you know, blue zone cultures that are plant-based, yes, the majority of my diet comes from plants. But guess what? Animals produce a lot of good, you know, nutrient value to me that I need. You know what I mean? Like I said, you can't get away from it. There's a reason why the Okinawans eat different kinds of animal products, the Costa Ricans, you know, and another misconception I want to bring up is when we start talking about the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Dia or California. When you're looking at it, like if you look at it and you actually do some information, because I responded to that annoying couple, and it's funny they didn't respond back. But if you look at the Seventh-day Adventists, according to Gallup polls, only 40% of Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarian, and of those, 1 in 8 are vegans. So the amount of vegans that are really in the Seventh-day Adventist movement are higher compared to the normal population, but overall, it's a very, very small. And if you look at this place in Southern California, it's a retirement home for people of these faiths. So yeah, if I take all the retired people from the Seventh-day Adventist community nationwide or worldwide, and I put them in one small community, guess what? I can be able to change, I'm going to be able to pad my stats there, And as soon as you bring that up with actual proof, it's like, okay, we can't talk about this. Let's talk about something else next. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you find that a lot. You find that a lot with the Seventh-day Adventist study when they try to skew it. Yeah, you find that a lot.
What the vegans don't tell you about the Seventh-day Adventist study is that the Seventh-day Adventists who were pescatarians, they also ate fish. Their health outcomes were better than anybody else's. So
yeah,
and they do this all the time. They take vegetarians who do eat animal products and they equivocate them with vegans. Not the same thing. Completely different diet. You know what I mean? You get eggs and dairy products, which are very rich sources of animal foods. And as far as like what I eat, I'm not an ideologue about my diet. I've never said, and I don't believe that the way I eat is the optimal way to eat for everybody. I just think meat has a good place in everybody's diet, but I don't deny that people can do well on the vegan diet. Now, if you want to say with supplements, to me, that's no longer a diet. That's a drug regimen. But
I agree with you, and that's why I had included in there, because I haven't met one vegan yet that doesn't require supplementation. That's just me. I'm sure it's out there. I just personally, as me, I haven't met one. So,
but if they want to do that, then that's fine. But you can't tell me that it's
don't virtue signal.
But you can't tell me that it's ethical to put me on a diet where I have to start taking pharmaceuticals. That's just not ethical, period. And another thing, just because they can do well or okay on the vegan diet, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't do better if they added meat into their diet either. You know what I mean? It doesn't make it optimal. Just because you're surviving, that doesn't make it optimal, and that's not something that they talk about.
Yeah, and like I said, the biggest thing with me is if everybody that wants to go vegan, I'm all about it. I'm all about whatever diet you want to choose. It's just being cognizant of the virtue signaling, and just if you have to end your argument, right? If you have to end your argument with insert fallacy here, I don't want to hear about what you have to say, because at the end of the day, I think any responsible adult should be able to say, like for me, I can say that I use electricity. Not all my electricity is produced by, renewable sources. I'm trying to take every step forward because I think that's great, not from saving the environment, but from a sustainability and, preparedness aspect. But at the end of the day, I can say, yes, me having a vehicle to drive justifies the bugs I may kill on the road. I'm able to say, yes, there are things I do that have an impact on the environment, and I'm willing to take that responsibility. No need to insert fallacy here. But when your premise is that you're a vegan and you're all about animal rights are the same as humans, having that argument is very dangerous, especially if you live in modern day 2018 where you're doing all these horrible things to animals. It's just, they can't take responsibility. At least I can say for me, I will take on, and I realize that it has an impact, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I'm justified. My intent means an opportunity are there. Vegans, they won't do it. They will say, well, I will insert a fallacy here. Fine, insert a fallacy. Don't take responsibility. You can't, but these are the same people you can't expect to take really anything seriously from that perspective. You know what I mean? If they don't think that, if they think they can insert a fallacy here and they don't have to worry about the actual impact they're having, well, what more is there to say? Those aren't the people that are getting solar on the house. Those aren't the people that are looking at renewable ways to produce food. Those aren't the people that are looking at a way to reduce their carbon footprint. They're not, because they can rely on a fallacy to not have to do it as long as they shop vegan.
It goes so much deeper than these inadvertent, quote unquote, accidental deaths, in combine harvesters. I mean, they create special viruses and release them to blind and kill rabbits, for example, the invasive species in Australia and other places in the world. What this virus does is it'll blind the rabbit that'll eventually just starve to death, and it dies a
Right.
slow and painful death. That's vicious. That is so cruel, right?
It
Then
is.
there's also pesticides that are designed, they're specially formulated to kill animals. This isn't
Drown them from the
accidental.
inside. Yeah, burns them from
Yeah,
the inside,
this is
causes them to drown. Yeah.
this is done on purpose. Then there's also, grain silos that have to be protected from rabbits and rodents and birds, what have you. And all these animals are being poisoned all the time. And the thing with that is that, when I kill something, I eat it. I use every single last part of it, including the pelt. These animals basically just die in the field, and guess what?
I agree. I can't
fertilize the vegan food.
I can't agree with you more. What's worse? Making a rabbit suffer a horrible death to eat a carrot, or me eating that same rabbit, not allowing him to suffer, and eating the carrot as well. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer. I can't even, I don't understand how that's somehow, if we're both killing the animal and one person is doing it without suffering, how is that not less cruel, But
the rabbits
they'll never
kill, right?
Yeah, they'll never admit to it. I mean, yeah, if you do
the hook,
the hook, neck, cervical dislocation. I mean, I don't think they feel a whole lot. Then again, I'm not the one that's getting their neck broken, but at the same time, like I said, and it's, for some people it may sound horrible, but overall, I mean, once it's disconnected, they're not feeling any pain, and overall, I think it's the most humane way to go. But
it's better than blinding the thing and having it die slowly of hunger.
I agree, and it's one of those things where I think that if more people saw where their food came from or had to take a part in it, they would understand. I think they'd have more respect. I mean, the people that I know that have have a ton of respect for animals are people that are in animal husbandry. You know what I mean? Like, I can tell you, for my first litter of rabbits, we had one rabbit that was kind of not, kind of the run of the litter. And I was up, every couple hours feeding him, and I know where this rabbit's going to go at the end, but I have compassion. He's not going to die because a cruel death of starvation. I won't allow that to happen. So if that means I have to get up every 2 hours to feed him till he can get to full size for me to, then do my thing, I'll do that, So, I mean, but like I said, I really don't care what people, think about me overall. But the people that I know that respect the environment the most, they're not vegans except for maybe a couple of them. The majority of them are omnivores or people that eat animal products. So I'm not convinced. But I feel like people take veganism and they make it seem like, well, you can only be compassionate if you're vegan or this or that. I even heard an argument from somebody stating that you can't teach children to be compassionate if they're not vegan. And I'm like, are you telling me that somehow the kid that's eating dinosaur chicken McNuggets doesn't have the same capacity to be compassionate as the kid that eats carrots and celery? Are you serious? Like, let's talk about anthropology for a second, But yeah, it's like for them, the answer to everything is veganism. It's not common sense. It's not, keeping families together. It's not, learning to be a rugged individual. It's not about taking personal responsibility. It's just stop eating meat, dude, and everything. You'll fix everything. Trust me, I'm vegan.
No, see, like, for me, eating meat is what actually cured a lot of my problems. And, I got rid of a lot of vitamin deficiencies by basically taking out a lot of plants with anti-nutrients in their diet and replacing them with meat. I still eat some plants, but very, very little. Very few and far between, and I feel so much better if I eat meat. But look, well,
it's because you didn't do vegan right, bro. Like, it's so funny. I see all these, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but you see all these people that are having problems with the vegan diet, and it's like, we're seeing this, and I'm seeing this, but at the end of the day, it's because they didn't do vegan right. But then when you try bringing up, well, maybe it's harder to do vegan because the oranges that we're eating today from the grocery store are 1/8, and this is scientifically proven, 1/8 the nutritional value as our great grandparents ate. You know what I mean? And so when you're looking at all this stuff, you're like, you try to bring this up, nobody wants to look at it. And I think that you're right. You are going to get nutrition you can't get from plants. That's why these tropical islands that are very you know, that are very cut off from the rest of society, they're able to sustain themselves on a plant-based diet because they are eating fish, because they are eating chicken or rabbits or pigs or whatever. You know what I mean? Like those animals are eating unedible food that are rich in phytonutrients and able to give that to you through consumption. You know what I mean? Like there's tons of beneficial, you know, nutrients, especially in prairie grass, because of all the things that die, decompose, everything they take from the soil and from the earth and from the air. But we can't eat alfalfa. You can try. You're not going to digest it too well. But your livestock derives off of it, and you're able to get those phytonutrients from them. You know, but they're not willing to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that the average vegan doesn't know anything about animals. They don't know anything about agriculture. They have a tenuous grasp on what nature even is, you know. People that are raised out in the country, like raised on farms, generally, they don't go vegan, man. It's just a byproduct of this city culture where people have been they've been taken off the land, detached from food production, and they no longer understand it. It's foreign to them. It's gross. It's disgusting. They just have no real good concept of it. They don't understand the circle of life. They don't understand that, you know, it needs to happen this way. They don't understand that the reason why they have their wonderful, you know, Macintosh computers and they're able to have their cars and all the luxuries of modern life is because we developed our society a certain way, and animal agriculture had a huge part of that in growing our brain to a certain size. And you know, you look at the more civilized and richer countries, the more a country is civilized and the more affluent it is, the more meat they consume on average. Obviously this is changing now with this vegan movement, but like meat is just something that we intrinsically understand. We desire it, we want it, we just recognize its value. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's always been this way.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't seen any scientific literature documentation that shows that, you know, eating meat is severely detrimental. And every time they bring up the red meat studies and every time they bring up the carcinogen studies, you have to remember that that's all undermined by the fact when they're talking about processed meat, they're talking about the fact that how it's preserved with chemicals or how it's preserved that's carcinogenic. Well, I hate to break it to you, Oreos are also just as carcinogenic because they are preserved using the chemicals that they're preserved and they're vegan. You know what I mean? And we were talking about red meat maybe being a probable, you know, based upon some slight correlations. That's not real. That's junk science. You know what I mean? And then you have to talk about all the other animals that are out there. And then you have to talk about all these Okinawans that are living over hundreds of years old. And then you have to talk about all these other things, you know, and they just refuse to look at it. Now, would I say the traditional Western diet is good for you? I think we can show that by eating a lot of fried foods. And, you know, I'm not under the opinion that, you know, overloading on, you know, grass-fed meat is probably the healthiest. Now, I could be wrong. Everybody's different. And I believe everybody's different. But I think if you eat a healthy diet and you take out the processed foods, and I don't believe in grains, and you just eat food, eat real food, you're going to do way better than you would if you're eating processed food that's produced by the agriculture industry. I mean, I think the science is there and we can see it. We see all these countries that have all these old people that are healthy and are thriving. You know what I mean? And so I think until we can look at it from a scientific point of view instead of from this, you know, this jaded view, I just don't think it's, you know, you're going to see it. And then you don't even see a whole lot of vegans that have been vegans 10, 15 years. You just don't. There's not a whole lot of them. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the problem. You can't study vegans who quit veganism after a year and a half. You know, how do you study those people?
It has like an 85% drop rate, doesn't it, or something ridiculous? Yeah. And it's just like, you know, like I said, I get that people want to feel like they're important, that they're part of something. You know, trust me, I get that. Like if you look at Joe Carbstrong's story, you know, he came from, you know, not the best family unit, family cycle, and you know, he became a gang member, and I don't hold anything against him. I understand, you know, me of all people, I understand that young men need something to, you know, to give them purpose and fulfillment in their life, you know, and everybody does it differently. You know, he joined a gang, you know, I joined the military and jumped out of helicopters. You know, everybody kind of has their own thing, you know, and I understand the importance for that, but that shouldn't underlay the idea and the responsibility you have to be at least, you know, cognizant of your, you know, cognitive biases, you know. You should at least be able to be open to science and math and all this other stuff. I get we all have religious backgrounds and just we were grown up a certain way, but I think it's important to look at things as logically as possible. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's wrong to ask.
Well, let me be logical and talk science and defend the, European carnivore. Like I don't know your genetic background, but if I had to guess, I'd say maybe you're descended from the Mayans or something like, right? Like those were your ancestors. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to tell you about me. My ancestors, my European ancestors, and this has been demonstrated, whether it was the Neanderthal or the Cro-Magnon, they ate an 80% meat diet.
Right.
So and it wasn't especially when it comes to like Central and Northern Europe, it wasn't up until about 2,000 years ago that they started farming. So, you know, my ancestors ate a predominantly meat diet. Now, closer to the equator, where the weather was, you know, more advantageous to growing food and there was more fruit and all of that, people maybe ate 50, 40, 30% carnivore diet. So those traits were passed down to us, which is why, you know, some people feel amazing on a carnivore diet and some people hate it, and some people feel good eating mostly plant-based diet, a high carb diet. You know, we're essentially the same on a certain level, where like I believe meat is beneficial, and at least some plants are beneficial, not necessary, but beneficial to all of us. However, there are very big genetic differences. Like I was saying, some people can't do peanuts, you know what I mean? Some people can't do wheat. And I think that has to be taken into consideration. We got to look at, what is it? Nutrigenomics? It's like this new study of your DNA and
Eugenics?
your food. No. I think it's nutrigenomics or something. They look at your DNA, they look at your genome, and they try to help you determine, you know, what allergies you probably, like looking at your genes, they'll tell you, well, you shouldn't be eating wheat because you know you have.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about, like panel testing, and it shows you what, like I know for celiac disease and stuff like that, a lot of people, you get a panel done to see what their body digests the best. And yeah, there's definitely, you know, people have a genetic disposition to, you know, what it is that their body can tolerate. So no, I totally agree with that. And you're right, everybody's different, and everybody's genetic, you know, is going to be genetically predisposition.
We're all the same species, don't get me wrong, and in general, the same food.
We digest things differently. You're right. There's no doubt that, you know, what's good for me may not be good for you. You know, and I think that's common sense, though. I don't understand how that's not, you know. Oh, that's not
well, because like new generations of people are born into this world where like you could get bananas in Norway in December, you know what I mean? Which is
right.
It's only really been happening for the last 20, 30, maybe 50 years. Like it's ridiculous to think that that should be your optimal food, especially in winter. You know what I mean?
No, I get it.
Those people were fishermen, you know what I mean? They should be eating primarily fish. And as far as like other meat eating populations, Hong Kong eats more meat than anybody else by far, and it's predominantly pork, and they live longer than anybody else. Now, I'm not saying it's just because of the meat, as there are a lot of, you know, confounding factors there, but if meat were so bad for you, they would be dropping dead before, you know, vegetarians. No. They're not.
You know, and like I said, when we look at any population of people, you know, maybe besides taking all the old Seventh-day Adventist nation and worldwide and putting them in one retirement home, overall, you see that the cultures that, you know, live the longest are eating meat of some capacity. And I don't think that's, I mean, I guess it could be up for debate, but that's just the facts. And I think you're right. Everybody has their own way of how they digest food and what foods work for them. So yeah, I think this blanketed statement of veganism is not very helpful. And like I said from the beginning, I don't appreciate them coming out and attack me because I'm living off grid and making a meal. I find that to be ridiculous too, but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, so I'm all totally off grid. I'm cooking food with solar, you know, I'm doing all this stuff, and you want to come at me because I'm eating some grass-fed chicken right now that I, you know, dispatch myself. Like, okay, you know, cool, bro. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what's there to say? But is there anything else you wanted to kind of touch up on? Because I think you know, as far as what I came to touch up on, I think we got most of it pretty quick. Yeah, it's amazing whenever you respect each other, how much information you can get out.
Totally, man. Like, yeah, I want to talk about just a little bit about food sovereignty and the right of people to, you know, be able to produce their own food. Because
see, now you're hitting my touchy subject. This is what I, you know, this is kind of my thing right here. I feel like you've been I feel like you've been stalking my videos. Yeah, I mean, where do you want me to start?
Well, look, like if the vegan diet, if the vegans get their way, this is going to be our problem. Not only are big agro are they going to take over basically production, they're going to be able to control all the seeds, they're going to be able to tell you what to do, they're going to take over agriculture. And then if you can't produce your own meat, which is the most nutrition dense source of food in your backyard, and on top of that you have to go buy pharmaceuticals to be healthy, you're completely out of control. If the system crashes, we all fucking get sick and die.
Well, yeah, and here's a good point too, and I think we should probably, because I have to go here real soon, but I think we should do me and you should do a video just on this, if that's okay, because I follow. I mean, you can probably tell how excited I am. I follow this with great detail, so I don't know how familiar you are with United States politics, but I can tell you that the reason why veganism will not be successful is if you look at the laws that we have on the books in the United States of America alone, both federal, local, municipalities, HOAs. The idea of just growing plant-based food in general is very criminalized. For example, like I tried to kind of hook Goji Man into this because he's Goji Man, but I don't think he produces any Goji plants. I grow Goji plants here on my little homestead. So I told him, hey, if you want it, I'll send you some heirloom seeds. And I was kind of hoping that he was going to say, you know, some yes or something that could construe as yes, because technically that's illegal. I can't do it. And I was going to mention that because if you look at reality, like, heirloom seeds are very criminalized. Seed banks, which used to be really popular, you know, in the 50s and 60s, are now criminalized. The fact that I can't send, you know, use seeds across state lines because of certain restrictions really goes. Basically, oh my God, it really goes to show you the intensity of this. And they'll try to justify it because, well, invasive species this, marijuana that. But at the end of the day, they have outlawed it to the point where HOAs, who are not even government entities, can control what your front yard looks like, you know? So the idea that this is going on and vegans don't want to say anything proves the point to me that they're not serious about conservation. They're not serious about permaculture. They're not serious about what they believe as far as their own ethics and values go, and they'll never be successful. Because until you're able to grow locally, we're not going to fix a lot of these world hunger issues. We're not going to be able to fix a lot of these different things. You know, the idea that, you know, I can't, you know, depending on where I'm at, I can't have an aquaponic system where I have basically an aquarium with plants growing on top of it is really mind boggling. So if we're talking about, you know, being able to be food sustainable, we're looking at these different legislations that are being put into play. And you know what? The US is bad when it comes to a lot of these laws, but the European Union in general, Europe in general, they have a lot stricter guidelines on that. So this idea that heirloom is here to stay is a misnomer. You know, GMOs taken over hard, and just blows my mind when you have vegans that are all for GMOs, whether we're talking about Dr. Avi or you're talking about Unnatural Vegan or Vegan Gains. Like, these people advocate for GMO, and it's just like, wow, like, I don't think they realize how much against themselves they're really talking about. And, you know, and this is just from a fiscal standpoint of just, you know, it being available, you know, for local growing. I mean, it just shows you how these premises are just not, it's just not feasible. So yeah, I think that we are doing ourselves a great disservice. You know, the fact that, you know, I don't know where you're at in the world, but the fact that I can't give you heirloom seeds to grow grow food that is genetically superior because it's not GMO, the fact that I can't give these to you that are pride proven is really sad, you know, like, for free. Like, I'm not even going to charge you. I just want to send you these heirloom seeds because I think it's that important that you have these seeds. Look at what I'm able to grow, you know, and the fact that I can't send them to you really just goes to show where we're at in 2018 as a modern society.
Well, and even if I have these heirloom seeds growing over here and my neighbor is growing, let's say, a tomato that's owned by Monsanto, if they cross-pollinate and Monsanto somehow finds the DNA of their proprietary seed in my tomato because of wind or bees, they could sue me, and, you know, they could take away my seed.
Yeah, and I wasn't even going to get into the permitting process, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. So the fact that we should be all, regardless of what your diet is, we should be on board with that. But yeah, I would love to have a conversation with you if you're ever free, and we can just talk about these issues, because I have like a 7-tier system and how we can change things, but it's definitely
we could totally talk about that on.
But yeah, and that's what I love to talk about. Like, that's really, you know, at the end of the day, you know, that's kind of my thing. Like, how can we make, you know, just how can we be as efficient as possible? And I think a lot of people don't realize the fact that, you know, and this is just real quick. They got in trouble at the fairgrounds in Los Angeles County because they were giving away free seats. Law enforcement came in and said, you can't do that. You don't have a permit to sell. They said, we're not selling, we're giving them away. And they still found some way to, to ticket those people. And it's just like, that's where we're at in certain places. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, the fact that I can't give you something for free, like, come on, really? It's for free. I'm just giving it to you.
Definitely not raw milk in many states in the United States.
Yeah, that's another great example. But yeah, I mean, like I said, people can talk about, people talk about, well, certain states that allow you to smoke marijuana or whatever drug you want to put into your body, but yet you can't put raw milk, which, people have been doing for, forever. And I think until we talk about food correctly, we're never going to get past these issues because and I'm sure you seem really well versed in animal husbandry. When you're not doing, when the end game is your health and sustainability, and the end game is not highest profit and yields, what you're able to produce is so much more of higher quality, so much more sustainable, and it's way more ethical. You know what I mean? And that's with anything. Better. Yep, and that's with anything. My number one goal is not to make a profit; is to take care of me and my family. And when you have that in mind, the ethics go through the roof, quality goes through the roof, everything goes through the roof. So I think that's just something important to realize. We have to look at food differently.
Yeah. Well, I have one closing remark in relation to that because it kind of struck close to home what happened in Venezuela, where people became so dependent on oil, they stopped producing food locally. And after oil prices dropped, which in my opinion was an orchestrated move, they literally started starving because they weren't producing enough food domestically and they no longer had the money to import all the food.
Eating dogs, cats, zoo animals. It's horrible, man. It's horrible.
This could happen anywhere. So is the importance of, I cannot stress enough the importance of producing food locally. And a great example of that is the Great Depression. People in the countryside, they didn't really feel it. You know?
There's a great documentary that talks about Cuba. It talks about the difference between Cuba and North Korea during the embargoes that the U.S. had put into place. Cuba thrived because the government said every piece of arable land, you will grow food. North Korea, they did what they normally do, top-down heavy leadership of rationing, and they suffer and they continue to suffer. And, Cubans, they've always been under the microscope, but you can't say Cubans don't eat well.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I appreciate the conversations. Like I said, I think it's amazing what we can do whenever people are, respectful of each other. And I think we should definitely, the next conversation, if you're up for it, that's if your viewers want it. Talk about this, food sustainability and how we can look at food differently. And I think we'll have a lot of good, I think you and me are pretty well versed on it. I think people will learn a lot about what they're actually restricted by, and how a lot of people growing gardens, might be doing something illegal and they don't even know it,
Yeah, no, I'm totally down. Maybe even next Saturday. Those days tend to work for me. But I had a lot of fun, man. This was a good, productive conversation. And thanks for coming through.
Absolutely, man. Always. I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, take it easy.
All right, man. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for coming through. Sorry about the technical issues early on. They seem to have resolved themselves. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm still roboting. But thanks, everybody, for coming through. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.